Chris Evans is returning as Captain America, but this time he's not coming back alone, he's coming back with a child. And while a lot of fans were shocked by this, I honestly wasn't, because after Endgame, the film's screenwriters, Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely, openly stated that Steve Rogers didn't just live a quiet life with Peggy Carter, but actually had 2 children with her. And while that idea remained debatable since Marvel never confirmed it on screen, this leak suggests Marvel may finally be acknowledging it by giving Steve Rogers an entire family, which immediately raises a much bigger question: what is the future of this child? Because in the comics, Captain America has had several children across different timelines and realities, including a child with Black Widow, a daughter with Rogue, and even twins with Peggy Carter herself, and some of these children went on to carry his legacy, some fought alongside him, and one followed a far darker path by becoming Red Skull himself. So the real question isn't whether Captain America has a child, it's which one Marvel is about to bring into the MCU, because depending on that answer, the future of Captain America could change forever. So, let's take a look at all the little ones Captain America had throughout Marvel Comics. In a what-if storyline connected to Secret Wars, the heroes and villains who were taken to Battleworld never made it back to Earth, and over time, they settled down, formed families, and had children. And one of those children was Sarah Rogers, the daughter of Captain America and Rogue, and Sarah herself turned out to be a mutant, possessing superhuman strength, speed, and durability. Although unlike her mother, she never displayed Rogue's signature power absorption abilities, but what she did show was the ability to fly at supersonic speeds, and more impressively, she proved herself worthy of lifting Mjolnir, while also permanently inheriting her father's vibranium shield, effectively carrying both Captain America's legacy and the power of Thor at the same time. And what makes this even more interesting is that in the comics, Steve Rogers' mother was also named Sarah Rogers, which raises an intriguing question about why Steve chose that name for his daughter. Because maybe, trapped on Battleworld and separated from Earth, he named her Sarah so that every time he looked at her, he'd be reminded of his life before the wars, before the battles, and before everything he lost. Or maybe it was just a coincidence, and I'm completely overthinking it, but either way, Sarah Rogers stands as one of the most powerful and symbolically important children Captain America ever had. In another alternate universe shaped by the events of incursions, most of Earth's heroes were wiped out, and in the chaos that followed, Hydra managed to take control of the planet, creating a full-scale Hydra empire. And in this reality, Captain America and Sharon Carter had a daughter together named Ellie Rogers, who inherited her father's superhuman strength, speed, and durability, along with his courage and sense of responsibility. And as the world fell under Hydra's rule, Ellie formed a resistance force to fight back and try to free what was left of humanity. And at one point she even managed to control the Venom symbiote purely through willpower, which already tells you how mentally strong she was. But in the end her reality was too far gone, and during an escape attempt she was shot by the Iron Baron, and the injuries were just too severe for her to survive, cutting her story short before she ever got the chance to truly change that world. Now at this point, it kind of feels like Steve Rogers just really likes the idea of having a daughter, because in another alternate universe, he has one more, this time with Peggy Carter, and her name is Sharon Rogers, a character who was introduced in the video game Marvel Future Fight. And in this reality, Captain America was never frozen in the ice, meaning after the war he returned home, married Peggy, and eventually retired, with Sharon stepping up to take the mantle of Captain America. Which actually lines up surprisingly well with how Steve's story ends in Endgame. But here's where things get a little weird. In many Marvel stories, Sharon Carter is actually Steve Rogers' love interest or wife, and in this universe, Sharon Rogers is essentially an alternate version of Sharon Carter. So yeah, it sounds strange, but Sharon Rogers ends up being very different from the rest of Steve's kids because she doesn't rely on super soldier powers alone. Instead, she likes to use advanced tech, including specialized armor designed by Tony Stark, and not just one suit but multiple armors, each built for different situations, along with an energy-absorbing shield that's most likely vibranium, a blaster lance that's exactly what it sounds like, a mix of a lance and a blaster, and on top of all that, she also carries a sword. So if Marvel ever brings Sharon Rogers into the MCU, I'm just saying, I expect all of this gear to come with her. Now this is where things get really messed up, because in the Ultimate Universe, Captain America actually has a son, and that son becomes the Red Skull. And in this universe, before going off to war, Captain America had a one-night relationship with his girlfriend Gail Richards, after which Steve was frozen in the ice, while Gail later discovered she was pregnant, and instead of being allowed to raise her child, the government convinced her to hand him over to keep his existence a secret, promising a normal foster life that never happened, because the boy was taken to a military facility where he was monitored, experimented on, and trained from childhood to become the perfect super soldier. And by the age of 14, he had already surpassed Steve Rogers in almost every measurable way, But that life of constant training and torture filled him with resentment toward both the government and the father he never knew. And when he finally escaped, he did something truly disturbing. He flayed the skin off his own face with a kitchen knife, not just to reject Captain America's legacy, but because every time he looked in the mirror, his face reminded him of his father. And after that, he took on the identity of the Red Skull, later acquiring the Cosmic Cube in an attempt to rewrite history so Steve Rogers would never be lost in the war and he could grow up with him and live a normal life. But that plan failed, and his story ultimately ends when he's killed by Wasp. And yeah, the chances of this version ever appearing in the MCU are basically zero, but if Marvel ever wanted a dark, psychological spin-off, this storyline is already right there. In another what-if-a-style scenario where Sharon Carter doesn't die, she and Captain America end up having 2 children together, the older son, Stephen Rogers Jr., and the younger son, Nicholas Rogers, who's very clearly named after Nick Fury. And what makes this pair interesting is that they're basically the complete opposite of Steve Rogers, because unlike their father, they don't really care about heroics, legacy, or living up to the Captain America name, and instead of following in his footsteps, they mostly exist to add tension and stakes to Steve's life rather than inspiration, which also means we now have yet another son of Captain America who's, let's just say, not exactly hero material. But with the writers previously stating that Steve has 2 children, these 2 actually line up pretty well with what the MCU could realistically adapt, although before locking that in, there's still one more possible set of Captain America's children that might fit even better into the MCU. Now we all know how badly Scarlet Witch wants children, and in a what-if-a-style storyline, that desire goes in a very different direction, because instead of her usual connection with Quicksilver, Captain America ends up forming a genuine, loving relationship with Wanda, and together they create an entirely new reality where they have twin children who are basically identical to Steve Rogers. But we don't actually get to see much of these twins in the comics, and honestly, if something like will never happen in the MCU, because Wanda already created a family, made Vision a dad, and now he's dead, so doing that whole storyline again would feel like Marvel repeating the same emotional beat all over again, so yeah, it's impossible. Now finally, we get a son of Captain America who actually turns out to be a straight-up hero, because in the animated movie Avengers, Heroes of Tomorrow, we're introduced to James Rogers, the son of Captain America and Black Widow, and in this reality, most of the Avengers were killed while fighting Ultron, with Steve and Natasha among the fallen, leaving James to be raised by Tony Stark in a hidden underground base in the Arctic Circle alongside the children of other Avengers, because the entire world was now under Ultron's control. And growing up, James and the others only knew the Avengers through Tony's stories about their past victories and glory days, while being trained every single day, since Tony knew that one day they'd have to face Ultron themselves. And when that moment finally came, James stepped up and led the next generation of heroes into battle, helping take Ultron down and free the world, making him one of the few sons of Captain America who truly lives up to Steve Rogers' legacy. And while James Rogers showing up in the MCU someday doesn't even feel that far-fetched, but Doomsday definitely isn't the stage where that would happen. So in the main Marvel universe, Captain America never actually had a biological son, but he did end up adopting one, because Ian Rogers was artificially created by Arnim Zola inside Dimension Z, and after rescuing him, Steve chose to raise Ian himself, spending nearly 11 years with him inside that dimension, essentially becoming his father. And once they returned, Ian grew into a hero of his own, taking on the name Nomad, and even fighting alongside Falcon after Sam officially became the new Captain America, and Ian went on to play a major role in taking down Zola and Hydra multiple times, was even responsible for traveling to Ellie Rogers' reality to help her. And in terms of abilities, Ian has superhuman strength, speed, and durability, along with a powerful healing factor that works as long as he stays in contact with Arnim Zola's biogel, and on top of that, he's a highly skilled martial artist who was trained directly by Steve Rogers himself, which honestly makes him one of the most complete and grounded sons Captain America ever had, even if they weren't related by blood. So yeah, those are all the little ones Captain America spawned across the Marvel comics, and if I missed anyone, let me know in the comments. Because Marvel continuity is wild and there's always something hiding in an alternate universe somewhere. And also tell me which one of these kids was the worst and which one was the best according to you. And if you've got ideas for what I should cover next, more Marvel, comics, or pop culture, drop those down below as well. And I'll see you in the next one.